Samantha Markle, The Diary of Princess Pushy's Sister, Part 1. Da, da, da. And that's what it was like. When this came into my shop, I just grabbed it and I had to read it. Now, I know a lot of people are either on the Samantha's a hero camp or they don't trust her camp. And because Meghan is perceived as the villain, often Samantha is perceived as the hero. But right at the start of all this Markle drama and saga, Samantha was really looked down upon and not trusted by many people. She was sort of seen as a bit of a big mouth, someone who was trying to cash in on her sister's new relationship. But then as the tide turned a bit and Meghan was sort of seen more unfavourably because more and more started to come out about some of her antics, people revisited what Samantha said and said, well, actually, maybe, she had a point. So there's all that to it as well. But I have to say that after reading her book, I don't feel like I'm any clearer. I don't feel like I really know Samantha. Now, there are obvious positives to Samantha. She went back and completed her education. She got a BA in sociology and an MA in counselling. And she did that as a mature age student. So all credit to her because that's really hard to do. Plus, she had the added hardship of severe health challenges that are ongoing and mean that she is in a wheelchair and often she feels, really quite ill and she has to struggle. But she's so resilient and so brave and she just keeps going. She has a marvellous sense of humour. She's a hard worker and there's a lot to like. There is a lot to like and admire about this woman. But then there are parts in the book where I sort of went, ooh, I don't think you really should have done that sort of thing, And also I could understand after reading this book that Meghan's perception of their relationship would be very different to Samantha's perception of their relationship. Now, why do I say that? Well, it's the age difference. You see, Samantha was a teenager when Meghan was a little baby. And so Samantha was babysitting her and loving on her and cuddling her and building this bond. And she really did love Meghan. I mean, that's just obvious through the book. But Meghan was obviously close to her as a little baby, but I don't know about you, I can't really remember much from my sort of crawling days. You don't really remember. I guess you remember more from about the age of 2, between 2 and 7. And Samantha did go off and live somewhere else where Meghan was still really little. They used to go around and visit her, but they weren't living together anymore. And then there were periods of time where Samantha would move back in with them and then they would have short sort of moments of time together. But by then, Meghan was sort of a bit of a surly, typical teenager, bossy sort of teenager. And Samantha was like a young adult, forging her career. So there was just that real discrepancy in timeline. There was so much distance between them that I just can't see that they would have the same relationship to each other. Just so much difference in ages. And also, I can see that they had a falling out really way before Meghan met Harry. They had a rather testy phone call. It was around the time when Meghan was doing Suits and she was living with Trevor Engelson. So she was, quite doing well, doing very, very well. And Samantha sort of was of the opinion that because Thomas had spent nearly $1 million on her to go to university, she thought that it was only proper that now Meghan was making really good money on Suits, that she should help out her dad or, make his retirement years a little bit easier. And so she rang Meghan up and she more or less said that she should help out their father. And Meghan took exception to this and felt like she had no right to really talk to her about her father or about her money and said, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, babe. And And Samantha said, well, I would have thought that she would just, should be able to talk about our father. And I'm not so sure, because they didn't have a lot of contact leading into that conversation. Now, I would imagine that you would need to establish the relationship to a degree of warmth and closeness before you started having the you should be helping out Dad with money conversation, but that could just be me. But it's sort of, I sort of understood Meghan's reaction, and then they really weren't talking. They were a bit, puppy with each other after that. And then a really, really strange phone call came from Meghan to Samantha. So Samantha says that she wasn't too mad at her, because 2 weeks later she got a phone call from her, and it was from Trevor's bathroom. And Samantha heard Trevor's friends laughing in another room, and she sort of said, what are you doing? Are you at a party? And Meghan said, no, I'm in Trevor's bathroom. In an almost adolescent giggle, she chimed, I'm looking in the medicine cabinet. And then Samantha rolls her eyes and more or less says, well, come on, cut to the chase. And then with her voice sounding mesmerised, she said with a long drawn-out breath, it's so weird seeing my toothbrush on the shelf in his medicine cabinet. And then Samantha sort of took that as, well, because she's moved in or their relationship has got to the stage that her toothbrush is in his medicine cabinet. And so she says, well, it sounds like you two are happy. And then she said, it's incredible, babe. And then Samantha goes on to say that she was happy for her and everything. But that was 2 weeks after they had this sort of altercation about Meghan supporting their father, financially. To me, that just sounds a bit, hey, I'm looking at a toothbrush in the cupboard. Wow, hey. I think it sounds a bit spaced out to me. So there's a few juicy bits about Doria, smoking on the front lawn in a dressing gown when Samantha comes home with her friend from school, and Samantha feeling rather embarrassed. There's no mention that it's marijuana in that particular moment in the book, which I noticed that the press sort of got that wrong, because they implied that Doria was on the front lawn smoking marijuana in her dressing gown, but Samantha just says she was smoking. Later on, she intimates that the smoke in the house smells a little bit like marijuana. And at one stage, she also runs up and looks through Doria's drawers and finds some rather interesting photographs, let's say, evidently, with Doria with other women. But she doesn't go into great detail, but they're of great concern to her. And she felt like telling her father, and the whole thing sounds quite dysfunctional and sad. And there seems to be, that tension you would expect, where Samantha and Thomas Jr. have come to live with the new family that their father has created. And, or rather Doria came to live with them, really, even though they did move into a new home. And you can just sort of see how Thomas Jr. and Samantha was sort of slowly sort of pushed out. It's typical second family syndrome, isn't it? Their father was still loving and was still their dad, but, it's quite obvious that he was absolutely besotted with Meghan and was quite besotted with Doria, particularly in the first few years. And so I would imagine that a teenage Samantha and her, younger brother would feel quite superfluous at that stage. Now, it's interesting with this book because it did actually give me a timeline, because that article in Vanity Fair, which was published in September the 6th, which was the Wild About Harry article, in that article, Thomas Sr. is not actually on the outs at that stage, because Meghan does actually say some nice things about him to the reporter that wrote the article for Vanity Fair. He gets like quite a nice, complimentary paragraph. It's mentioned that he was a lighting director, and he's actually built up in the article. So he wasn't on the outs. But by November, when they announced their engagement, he was. So 2 months. He's being praised up in one article, and 2 months later, Samantha is trying to ring Meghan to find out what's going on, because her father's in tears on the phone and feeling like he's being ignored by Meghan and feeling like he's being pushed out and like he's not going to be invited to the wedding, or that they don't want to see him anymore and they're embarrassed about him, and, and he feels like he's getting the run around from the palace and all that sort of thing. 2 months. And that's when Samantha went into protection mode. Now, there's no question that she really loves her dad. She really loves her dad. And she went to bat for him. When he started talking to Samantha on the phone and acting worried and unsure, and his voice would sometimes crack on the phone, and she could tell that he was really upset and really embarrassed by what was going down and didn't really know what to do, that's when she swung into action. And it was actually her that set up that ill-fated photo shoot, which was supposed to put Thomas Sr. in a good light. And she actually talked her dad into doing that, which was sort of a pity. I can understand the motivation behind it, but we all know it just did not end well. And then there's sort of silly decisions made by Samantha where things have already gone wrong. She's already done interviews that have blown up. Now, it may not have been her fault, but they've blown up in a negative way. And she's claiming in the book she didn't intend them to blow up in a negative way. So at this stage, she's not trying to have a go at Meghan. She's saying that it just went wrong, that she was misunderstood, and that what she said was, set out of context. And then she's going on Twitter and trying to defend herself and defend her family, and it's just going bad to worse. And you can't help thinking that really she should have just laid low at that point. Because don't forget, she is saying that she wasn't trying to hurt her sister at this stage, but that everything's being misinterpreted. So if everything I was saying was being misinterpreted, that's when I would shut up. Now, this particular instance, this is one of the areas where I sort of went, really? So I'll just read you, there's a few little lines and see what you think. So she's already had interviews that have gone wrong, and she gets another call. I got a call one morning from a quiet, soft-spoken voice, but he sounded so young and innocent that I automatically trusted him. He said he just wanted to come by the house and talk a bit and get an idea of our family from looking at our photo album. I agreed, knowing that I would limit what I was going to say to him anyway and only give him boring pictures that really meant nothing, and I'd be vague and blah, 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 blah. It's like, oh, come on. I mean, come on. It might be the Aussie in me, but I just don't buy that. I mean, I don't know whether you were putting feelers out to see what was out there as far as, getting compensated for a bit of information. That's where the book doesn't gel, because she's telling us, and I was so misunderstood at the beginning. It was never my intention to cause any trouble. And then a few pages later, she's this softly spoken person that she's never met, who's a journalist, that's speaking to her on the phone, and she automatically trusts them and lets them come to her home. So, yes, that's why it's hard to sort of gel with the story, because there's a little bit inconsistent like that. There is another bit in the book which is really interesting, because earlier on in their relationship, before they announced their engagement, Samantha points out that Harry actually paid for Meghan to go to a home and have Thanksgiving with Doria and Thomas, and Harry actually paid for them to have staff and a chef and a butler, and they were really, really looked after. And that was at the time when he was off in the Caribbean. I think he was doing a thing for AIDS from memory. And it just seems like such a silly missed opportunity that the father of his girlfriend was going to be there for Thanksgiving. And wouldn't that have been the perfect opportunity to have turned up or say, look, I'm going to be in the Caribbean, but when I get back, let's rent this house and have a late Thanksgiving celebration together, and I would love to meet you. Now, wouldn't that have fended off all the angst? I mean, I just can't fathom the fact that Harry never made the effort to meet Meghan's father before he proposed marriage. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Well, the other thing that I found such a revelation in this book was that Thomas Jr. was the one that took the press to their uncle's place, and then the uncle, under a bit of duress, told the press the address of Thomas Sr. And that's when he started getting hounded and getting the paparazzi hounding him and everything. And that seems like a bit of a setup too. So I don't know what to think, really. Thanks a lot for joining me, and I'll see you again really soon. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.